is April 3rd, 1952, at Argonaut, Rangeley, Maine. I, Wilhelm Reich, am sitting alone in the large room in the lower house. All people are gone. There's nobody here to listen to what I'm saying. The recording apparatus is the only witness. I hope I shall not go into the great strain, into the details, into the worries, the sleepless nights, the tears, the expenditures in money and effort, the patience which I have to have with all my workers and with all my students. I happen to discover the life energy. I happen to induce the Oranur experiment. I know what it means for the future development of medicine, biology, philosophy, and natural science. I'm fully aware of it, and in this awareness, I am completely alone. There's no soul anywhere far and wide to talk to give one's feelings, to let one's feelings go freely, to speak like as friends speak to each other. I hope that someone will at some time in the future listen to this recording with great respect. Respect for the courage that was necessary to sustain the research work in organ energy and life energy all through these years, to start this Oranur experiment which gives us so much trouble. They see only the trouble. They don't see, or they don't want to realize what it means for medicine, biology, and science in general, as well as philosophy, to have this Oranur going. If that had not been in their structures, not in their desires, not in their positive conscious wishes, they're all decent and good people. No, it is in the structure. It is somehow in their tissues, in their blood. To them, it is mostly a bother, an inducer of sickness, suffering, and at times I have the distinct feeling that they believe, or they do not dare quite to admit their own thoughts, that I may have gone haywire. 8,000 or 10,000 years since patriarchy has ruled its destinies, and since natural love was extinguished in the newborn infants. I shall not go into that, it's all written up in my publications. Whoever knows these publications also knows what that means. The discovery of the life energy would have been accomplished long ago, because it is true, because it turns up in every single move, in every single word, in every single opinion, in every single paper, in every single thing they did to whatever ever had to do with the discovery of genitality, life, love. Such people as Lawrence, or such philosophies as Giordano Bruno's, or such great lives as Jesus Christ, and so forth and so forth. It is a sad, lonely chapter of the human race. I don't feel that I am obligated to solve this riddle or to do anything about it.
Whoa, I like this meme a lot, by the way. This one's cool. Did you post this one already? I haven't even seen this one. I like this. Conscious, subconscious, unconscious. Wow, this is
Pretty
great.
cool.
Love can fool you, hate can make you blind. Affections cloud your judgments. If you make decisions when you're happy or sad, you can never be right. Listen now to my advice, the recipe for better life. Don't follow your heart, it might only let you down. Follow only reason, emotions lead to treason. And only one thing will never let you down. To believe in yourself, believe in the reasons that you have laid out in the argument that will last forever.
Listen to the Cure, listen to the Cure, listen to the Cure, and think about life. People of Earth and anywhere else in between, welcome to another exciting Advanced Philosophy Memes chat. This is going to be one of the most lit episodes. We have Baked and Awake here, Stephen and Brittany, also both longtime Tartaria people that have been secretarian for the and here comes Svatoslav. I knew it as soon as I said hello that there would be people pouring in. We're about to start talking about a bunch of things. We've been mentioning a lot of these concepts like confidence and insecurities and anxiety, and so anxieties come up a lot, and then so the sexual aspects of anxiety, and that led us into Wilhelm Reich again, which has been every episode. I wanted to maybe let Brittany and Baked introduce themselves a bit. Do you want to start, Baked, and then Brittany?
Thanks, Andreas. Good to be here with you. Hopefully, a lot of the folks who come today will know me a little bit, but podcaster based out of the Pacific Northwest, and have been enjoying my association with the community. The original Tartary Nova Discord, and the whole larger community that interacts with us here on YouTube and in our respective sandboxes. So stoked to be here and talking about this subject matter today with everybody.
I am Brittany. I am a researcher of many topics. I was getting my PhD in psychology, and I stumbled upon Reich kind of before that and didn't really realize how far rooted he was in psychology, because I was looking at Earth and atmospheric sciences when I discovered Reich. And also LRH had name dropped Reich as one of these kind of magical scientists that great things with energy. So I've spent a lot of time in and out studying Reich, got back into it a couple weeks ago, and had my mind blown with some new inquiry into his work that hopefully we can get into later or in another episode. But I'm excited to be here. I love the APM group. They've been really fun to follow and to start joining in some of the memes and bringing things together. So
epic. Kind of a funny thing that I was listening to this band called Current Joys, and it was because I was feeling anxious, and then I was like looking into the band. I was like, this is a pretty good band. It was very random that it came up, and so it was this. Let me find the article for this, and it spiraled into a thing that made Wilhelm Reich come up again. So Current Joys, name of the band. He's got some pretty good music. Nick Radigan suffers from generalized anxiety disorder. So I was like, whoa, what's that exactly? And so I looked into GAD. And so GAD is this thing that a lot of people have now, where they have uncontrollable, excessive, irrational worry about activities, about going outside, about dealing with social interactions with people. And it causes a lot of really bad issues, because it's related to like almost anything from relationships to finances, and you end up with trouble sleeping, exhaustion, hard time eating, irritability, sweating, trembling. And people have wondered a long time, like, what causes anxiety and what do we do to overcome anxiety? Psychiatrists have often introduced the idea of pain suppressors and anxiety suppressors that will help you mitigate the function of these actual experiences. Other people have suggested that this is a bad idea. Scientologists and psychologists in general have said through therapy, we're better off without pain suppressors or anxiety suppressors, because we should probably face these experiences, and so maybe dealing with this in another way than taking selective reuptake inhibitors and in the like. Maybe we should actually figure out how to strengthen our ability to deal with anxieties. And so that's why Wilhelm Reich, I feel like Reich has that whole bag figured out. And so let's just quickly introduce Wilhelm Reich, who was born 1897, died in the 50s, 1957. He was a doctor of medicine and a psychoanalyst and a member of the second generation of the analysts after Sigmund Freud. Their connection is deeper. I'll allow our guests to go into that a bit more. But he wrote some really cool books, character analysis in 1933. And so if you start to think about what was going on in the Ukraine and in Germany in 1933, the mass psychology of fascism, he immediately understood what was happening with character analysis of how we're breaking down people through Enneagrams and through social conformity and saying, well, we need these kinds of people on this kind of team. And then the sexual revolution, which was, quite a departure, you would think, from fascism to a solution in the sexual revolution. And a lot of his works contribute to the development of Anna Freud's ego and the mechanical defense and his ideas of muscular armor.
Brittany mentioned it about the orgone energy now, and talking about, ostensibly there's a science surrounding it and behind it, and that exists today, that some people have tried to, keep the spirit alive and keep moving a little bit forward with this stuff. But Reich, at the end of his career, was pointing, weird tubes at the sky and making it rain. And then he got in trouble with the feds, and then he goes to jail and they took all his stuff, and we don't have any of his last stuff. And it was the rain cloud stuff, and it was his cancer stuff. I found that interesting. In the case of both, we were talking about weird, imperceptible forces, right? They're not X-rays, they're not gamma rays, they're not this kind of ray or that kind of ray. But he was claiming they were part of the same systems, and they were all right there for the observing and for the reproduction, which, by the way, for those who are still with us, people just discredited him a lot and didn't go behind him, from what I understand, and actually try to reproduce his results very much. He was discredited by one or two people here and there, and it's all it really took, because the political climate was enough, and the societies that he ran with, ran your reputation. As I said earlier, he had like a bad social credit score on a number of fronts and was kind of hosed because of it. However, to conclude my thought, I just got into recently, and Andreas knows this, very recently I got into amateur radio out of just sheer old manedness and being a nerd. And it's not only incredibly way more interesting than I ever thought it would be as a topic. And I think I sent you a message to this effect, Andreas. These radio people, first off, all of them are old engineers and retired this and that. And of course, they're retired cops and off-duty cops and all the usual you would think want to play with walkie-talkies in their spare time. But a lot of them are big brain types. They're building boats and working on projects and working for tech companies. They've been working in IT for 15 and 20 years. And I know this because when you get on the radio, as soon as you're allowed on the radio, you get on a couple of these nets and they're sitting there yakking the day away in their own society, right? Just like the internet, it's a parallel realm of people talking all day long. And my point is the whole hobby was originally built around crystal tuning of the radios. You guys, reception all around the world is all about the atmosphere, and a good radio operator transmits with the lowest necessary power to get their message out. So you want to get your message out, but do so while not interfering with the other people working the same frequency as you, neighboring frequencies. It's fascinating shit. And it couldn't be more magical. These people, the very first magazine I get from the newbie Boy Scout Radio Association, whatever it's called, ARRL, right? Amateur Radio League, is a magazine with a Hubble telescope looking image of the sun on it with the headline, "Here Comes the Sun." They're talking about the grand solar maximum coming, that is still a few years away, 4 or 5 years away, and how operators have been getting ready for this for years. Reception's going to go through the roof for about 10 years, blah, 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 blah. My point is even in the everyday near term, these guys are like armchair meteorologists. They're monitoring the weather and the condition of like solar flares and solar activity continuously because it directly impacts on their ability to communicate. And all our systems are all radio. All this stuff is just disguised radio. All our internet, our Wi-Fi is radio, right? TV is RF. It's UHF, right? To be a little bit more specific, that's the frequency it travels in. It's all radio. So it's very interesting to me when these guys, whether it's Reich or Reichenbach or whoever else, is over here looking into that area and saying, hey, this stuff does connect to us. Not only our technology systems rely on it, but it may be continuously affecting us, sometimes in perhaps not great ways. You know, I mean, he realize.
Let's go even harder. Let's push it a little harder. Okay, check this out. All right, so when we're talking about the radio, because video killed the radio star, let's go back to the beginning. So before there were DVDs and vinyls and cassette tapes and everything else in between, there was a electric voice phenomenon, which was even just the idea that you could have sound from electronic radio. So EVP, and this is like we're talking about ghost hunting really right now, but yeah, parapsychology and talking about spirits on the other side of the radio. And this is they have TV movies about this, and everyone says it's a hoax. Okay, well, how far back does this go? Well, 1840s, the spiritual religious movement started distinguishing that spirits could be dealt with by mediums, and you have people like Thomas Edison and everyone in between. Attila von Salazar was a photographer that was working with this and attempted to use in 1941 78 RPM records. The Konstantin Radev, a Latvian psychologist, in Uppsala, Sweden, start looking into all of the EVP stuff, and you find that the people that invented the television, invented the radio, they did this originally looking for EVP, looking to find.
They're looking for ghosts.
Yeah, well, ghosts or people from the future, or artificial intelligence from the future that can communicate through radio in the past. Who's to say it's a dead person? It could be all sorts of paranormal things you're picking up from an EVP, but there were people talking about spirits and channeling it.
There you go. Well, that's some analysis and assessment of the gateway process level shit right there. The CIA was looking into the existence of extra dimensional beings. They were doing it through that hemisync, like binaural beats hypnosis, to harken back to another topic that came up briefly earlier in this discussion with Mesmer, right? Wasn't mesmerism the birth of hypnosis, right? Mesmer was one of the originators of that, of all of that. But you might be familiar with it. You know what I'm talking about, that hemisync stuff. According to that doc anyway, there's some things out there that aren't just ghosts that people encounter. So fun stuff.
The idea is where you have from one ear to the other ear several different layers of sound that are at different levels from each other, and that way your brain's trying to balance itself. So it's like you're standing up and you're dizzy and you're trying to find your equilibrium. So your ears are hearing these ultrasonic and lower sonic sounds, and eventually your brain changes to theta state or to delta state or different brain states that you have in dream patterns. This is binaural recording, where you have sounds that are designed to be heard from different levels. And this is, really old stuff where you have a speaker here, a speaker there. It's really great when you have earphones, because then you can do.
I mean, it also seems to me like our 5.1 and 7.1 sound systems are even that diagram that Andreas just showed a second ago sort of looked like that for sure.
Yeah, so this is Gnarl, which is a program you can download that allows you to mix your own sounds left and right ear pattern. So you can actually,
There we go.
and it's free. And so you can do this for yourself with your own headphones. And there's a number of different versions of beats that are set up that are able to make your brain go into a euphoric or an adrenaline inducing state or a depressive state where you can calm your blood pressure, your heartbeat, and it release serotonin. And this is all through sound waves. All you're doing is listening to one sound in one ear and another sound in another, essentially.
Well, isn't it interesting? Here is another example of powerful effects of interacting with something invisible, in this case, sound. I suffer from tinnitus too, so I get a lot of weird stuff comes through at times, like all sorts of different sounds and feelings and vibes. You get hit with shit that like literally makes you like, you're like, whoa, what is going on here sometimes? I do like listening to binaural stuff at times, find it quite soothing. Tend to like stuff that's in the lower frequencies when that stuff's put forward. Of course, it's nice and calming usually when you hear that.
Another useful thing would be using the solfeggio frequencies.
Mhm.
So 528, 396, 417, 285. These all have specific crown chakra is 963, 396 is the root chakra. And they have a system that actually is, you hear this a lot in chimes, and they use this in yoga now. I mean, it's become pretty mainstream that sounds affect your mood. Music is used for this purpose, and music is manipulated for this purpose. Some music literally is designed by well-trained geniuses who've gone to Juilliard or elsewhere to learn how to make a song that has a rising action, that's hypnotic, and has a tone that really resonates with your heart, your chest, and can also reduce pain or help relieve stress. I mean, this can be done with sounds, and they do this all the time in commercials now.
On Reich, that he had wanted to have this romantic affair with his mother. And I was thinking about this today, just in different times when even with lockdown, and an adolescent boy that's not exposed to any other females, it's only like their sister or their mother. If you're not going out and you're not going to schools or whatever, the time that you're in and what's happening is important to look at when you're looking at how that develops too. So it could be limited exposure to other females, and that would be a natural thing that could happen if those are the only people of the opposite sex you're around. I hadn't considered that.
Yeah, what an interesting character, right? I guess I had heard of Reich before Brittany, I think, had reintroduced me to Reich as a research topic whenever I started looking into it again more recently, more seriously. And then subsequently did a podcast episode on it. I did like a two-parter. I believe it ended up, running into like a couple of episodes. Such an interesting character, and one who just had all this, what would we call it today? You have a social credit score today already, right? A burgeoning social credit score. And here's this, pretty independent thinking doctor, pretty smart guy who did all right for himself for a while and made his way for a while in the the cognoscenti of his profession, right? I mean, you can't really do much better than starting out in Freud's cohort and publishing consistently as he tended to do. He was fairly prolific. And we know, those of us who have looked into him for a while know how this story ends, right? This guy died in incarceration in a federal prison in the United States. His works were very heavily pursued and removed from circulation, and it is said and reported that these were burned, like incinerated, like a physical book burning, not like a figurative or metaphorical one. So that's always like, wow, like, you know, there's, if I'm not mistaken, you can still like check out stuff like Mein Kampf from the local library and get that very accessibly. But this guy's works were deemed so dangerous by the FDA. This was, by the way, again, it's weird. You guys picked a good one, you know, in my opinion, and I'll shut up here in a second. But here we have like the typical, they ultimately got him for certain supposed shipping crimes of shipping his orgone cabinets across state lines or components for those, which he had, you know, been under an injunction against doing. And they throw him and they lock him up for it. He dies in prison for it, but they were really after his work the whole time. And if I'm not mistaken, this came after he demonstrated some of his latter-day technology, namely those, the weather cannons, right? The orgone cannons. Didn't he demonstrate them a couple times? And like Men in Black showed up of some sort. And days or weeks later, he was, you know, up on the charges and on his way to Bad Lucksville. So
Here's
wild.
look at his cloud busting machine really quickly. I was gonna say his cloud busting machine is incredible because it has, you know, obviously, you know, designed to make weather change. I mean, this was beyond your average psychologist or philosopher.
To elaborate on the whole stress, anxiety, Reich work, everybody should read Bioelectrical Investigation of Sexuality and Anxiety. What he's done is he's taken anxiety, or he's taken, I guess, the orgasm or sexual, he's calling it sexual release, but I think it's more or less anything that you enjoy. It could almost be interpreted as having a similar effect. But the way that he defines stress and anxiety is the best that I've seen it kind of broken down, and it helps a person understand the system. And it's the vegetative nervous system, which is now the autonomic system. So there's been some term changes, and I'm sure people know that have studied him. But so he's got the real stress, the neurotic stress, and the stasis anxiety. And he goes in to talk about the feedback loop and how that is the way to kind of scientifically measure. You take the pleasure effect and then you take the stress effect, and you can, in a lab now, measure like mechanism and cause and response, because they're both a part of the same system, but they have an opposite function, essentially. So that is the book totally breaks it all down, and it talks about not just relieving stress through sex, but the repression of sexual identity, sexual thoughts, physical active sex, how that does drive a system more so than, I guess, what Freud said. And he talks about the libido being this in-between systems, whether it's the autonomic or the peripheral system. So I don't know if anyone's read that book, but that's like almost a precursor to being able to talk about how he felt about anxiety. Also, he wrote the book Character Null, and that's something to go into. I know Andreas opened with that, but it goes so deep, and you'll only find people analyzing. I found like Elon Musk's a Reichian breakdown character analysis, and they have one on Bill Gates of a Reichian breakdown. So there's people that are trying to use it, resurfacing, and it was really big in Norway. And he was treating people. His treatment methods for disorders were unorthodox, but they seemed to be effective for most of the people that the reports. And he would do like shock therapy and act out behaviors that people would say, if they're, doing just talk therapy and telling Reich about what behaviors they had that they weren't appropriate, Reich would start acting them out. and be just very charismatic and kind of get that into the memory and have them see it visually, and then it would create a change. His psychoanalytical approach to curing disease was effective. He also talked a lot about choline for anxiety reduction, but that he preferred to just prevent it from happening. And that's when he got into a lot of the sexuality research. So when he talks about anxiety, it's more just to explain it in the mechanism and measure it and use that in his labs with his patients and clients or whoever, volunteers for at some of the tests they did. But he's using that to have his baseline of a system to compare with the pleasure systems and to essentially prove a combination of functions, but it's on the same pathway. And if we can manipulate certain things in each, it's going to impact the other. And he's not saying, masturbate every day and you won't be stressed out. He's scientifically breaking down what it does, the physiological mechanisms and how it can impact you and cause stress and anxiety.
I like the idea of the sexual repression and the sexual control of society that was going on at this time, how it was manipulated, that people were essentially being used to purchase prostitutes or pornography, or all of a sudden marketing comes out, right? So the thing that's going on simultaneously to this is Edward Bernays, right? So let me just really quickly pull up
Propaganda.
Godfather Propaganda, and also the nephew of Sigmund Freud. So what's funny is this all centers around, again, Freud, this guy who was a cocaine addict with jaw cancer that was continually figuring out ways of freebasing his cocaine so he could get higher and higher. So he's essentially one of the world's first crackheads. And, not to give him too much credit, but like also for credit where due, he introduced a lot of these, theories and ideas that were already in existence before him. I mean, Spinoza talks about some of this stuff in Amsterdam in the 1600s, and clearly this stuff goes back further, but his nephew Bernays figured, okay, we can use this for propaganda, but you can't because propaganda is against the rules now. So we call it public relations. So Edward Bernays introduced selling sex. He introduced the idea of selling security, and selling a sexy dress would, make you more sexy. Like we can make you more yourself because you're just like everyone else until you have a green jacket from us. And all of a sudden sexuality was pivoted from this sexually repressed generation into, we can sell you something that compensates for your lack of sexuality. And it seems like, it's people kind of want to beat around the bush with sexuality, but it's it's something that was a controlled commodity by society for so long that it's still being used to control us to this day. And we see this with Tinder and with all of these social networks where you're buying the opportunity to interact with people that's controlled by a state or a corporation.
About Bernays and Freud on the century of the self, this documentary, it was pretty damn amazing. Unfortunately, I was that was who John from our group, who was openly racist Nazi, sent me this, but saying that Nazi is somewhat reasonable on internet is pretty scary,
So wait, he was saying that Bernays was okay or made the Nazis okay because Bernays did it too? Was that he's justifying the Nazis with Bernays? Because that's spicy.
He just shared this documentary. I suggested to watch it. It has some ideas from Nazism as well, but it's way more than that, I believe.
Right.
Good.
I mean, publicly, I would recommend almost all of Alan Curtis documentaries. I think Power of Nightmares is one of my favorite ones. I think that's his 2003 one, which was all about how we pivoted the emotional irrationality of the September 11th event into going to Afghanistan right, which had in Iraq, and especially Iraq, which had nothing to do at all, even on paper, with the September 11th event, but emotionally it did, right, because we had to do something, and so there was a problem there that we could tackle. So emotionally, we relied on propaganda, or public relations rather, at that point. So it's true, there is the Project for the New American Century. It takes a lot of the neoconservatives. Were Trotskyites, and they use a lot of the same kinds of propaganda pivoting techniques as the national or international socialists. And that's an important thing to think about, actually, because at the end of the day, that should work the other way. It should actually be that when we see that, we don't say, okay, well, the Nazis are just doing what we do today. It's like, no. Notice that and pivot. Stop doing the same. Don't repeat history in the ways where you become justifying the worst atrocities that are even on a purely hypothetical level. Like, to do evil is bad, right? Because it's bad for yourself and it's bad for the world around you. And so, in a completely abstract sense, you should constantly be trying to store your energy and keep it reserved and conserved for putting it into what you want to make the world into, and how you want to make the world a better place. But if you're constantly under the wing of these propaganda icons, the Gestalt and the emotional control, so you're seeing and you're feeling the way you're told to feel, then aren't you being led through a maze to want the wrong thing? It's not necessarily the right thing, at least.
Yep. If I may, I actually was thinking about this for a moment, and I think I have a question for point of clarification for us here, right? So we're talking about the concept of anxiety and human sexuality, right? We have a format of what constitutes an advanced philosophy meme or not, right? One of the key takeaways I thought I took from when I was looking into Reich for the podcast, and again, like just sort of revisiting briefly, getting ready to chat today, was at the time I looked into it, the writings of his that I did read, and I don't own any of his books, sadly. I just opened with talking about books having been burned, but we're also, Brittany's sitting here holding up earlier works of his. There's works of Reich's that have survived. I believe the only stuff that got burned of his was stuff that he published in his latter days, had to do with cancer research, had to do with the orgone research directly. The same stuff that they seized, including the cloud cannons, that thing that they showed there. And squirreled off to a bunker somewhere, supposedly. Maybe it went to the dump. Maybe they didn't care about it at all. I don't know. But that's not the impression we all got, right? Anyway, point was, I always felt like it was a timely topic that he was on. If I'm not mistaken, some of his earliest research that led him down that path was some of the treatments that he did with soldiers who were shell-shocked, that they had some positive indications of PTSD relief from some of the stuff that was, later definitely held up as the very quackery that they didn't like. This research into feeling good and being gratified in some way, shape, or form. In the case of the orgone cabinets, it was ostensibly by the waves that you were being exposed to, right, inside the cabinet. That would eventually induce a euphoric state and maybe lead to a climax of some sort. But this, in the pursuit of, at least ostensibly, if I'm not completely mistaken, of like balancing energies in the body and freeing up energy flows within the body, therefore fostering a healthful state in the system, that and treating the person as a whole and sending them off energized, feeling better, right? And this maybe is no weirder in a lot of ways than something like chiropractic could be today. At least like the manual type, that foregoes a lot of weird apparatuses that they put people into, like when the chiropractor lays hands on you and cracks your back. And, you know, I'm sure there's a lot of opinions in this room as to what the relative value of a science or art such as that is. But anybody who's ever gone into a chiropractor super jacked up with a little tear popping out of the corner of their eye when they crawled out of the car and then walked out standing up, like I have a few different times in my life already, we'll tend to think we like our chiropractors. But anyway, so my takeaway was that Reich was onto that sexuality, healthy sexuality was intrinsically tied to healthfulness and vitality, and potentially even in fighting off disease or not fostering the growth of a disease like cancer, which he had a specific type of understanding of what cancer cells were and how they would or wouldn't grow in the body, or under what conditions they would be more inclined to grow and proliferate, and that all was tied back to healthy sexuality. And I thought that was cool, and I always liked it. And I also thought that we see a lot of people acting out in the modern world. To complete my thought, thank you everybody for bearing with me, is when you look at the conversation that surrounds incel culture today and the concerns about it, and the very real fact that there's a lot of really sad people who are involuntarily celibate and who in a lot of cases act out because of it, and they're not feeling healthful, living healthful, experiencing a good and fulfilling life. And probably some of the older ones are, you know, have been with us for as long as there have been people, and have suffered greatly in the form of, you know, early onset of chronic illnesses and maybe even diseases, and being susceptible to them. I can't imagine, you know, what that could be like. So, I mean, yeah, so that's it. That's it. That was a thought that I had.
Yes, that is, I guess, in the origin of his studies, what he was trying to do, though, was prove that there was an electrical discharge with mechanical discharge. And
Yep.
if you measure that electrical discharge, or prove that that's what it was, what does that mean for the systems that are involved then, versus just, is it just mechanical? And so that's the later part. He was able to show that, yes, there is a buildup of tension. It's measurable. We can use science to say that that's happening. And so, yeah. And also at the time, it was like commonly accepted that women weren't supposed to experience pleasure. It wasn't common for women to have an orgasm or whatever. And that he wanted to prove that.
The very notion, yeah, the very notion.
And so it is the same. He essentially goes on to prove the mechanism behind both. And it's really, the book is so fascinating. Yeah, I have so many notes that I've made, but if you like science and lab experiments that can, I don't know, this is the one to read. So,
Well, go ahead and if you want to pull up a quote, like that's also cool.
quotes.
You know, and we don't have to put her too hard on the spot. Maybe you can, looking at it, leafing through the materials you have around you, Brittany, while we're sitting here chatting. But the fact is that, you know, we're talking about, so that, as I was saying, you know, that was my biggest takeaway. Was I always personally just instinctively felt like, yeah, if you're having a fulfilled life and you're experiencing love and acceptance from the people around you, you're going to feel less misanthropic. You're going to feel less disaffected. You're going to feel less, you know, inclined to be dissatisfied with your lot in life. And therefore you're, you know, probably experiencing naturally, without the help of intervention or, you know, the methodical approach that Reich had to introduce in order to try to treat his patients and learn about what worked and didn't work at the same time. we're going to live a healthier life, that we're able to express ourselves, we feel validated, and therefore these things don't have an impact on us that becomes either and forgive me if it's not the right term, but either a neurosis of some kind or some other sort of condition, like I've already characterized, a physical condition potentially even.
Right. It's vitalism, right?
Right. So I always loved that about the research that he did, and I felt like we saw him get in trouble once early in his career for writing about fascism, right? The politics of fascism. He sort of got some censure for that work. It was accepted but criticized, and then later he got in trouble for his recognition of the sexual revolution, his recognition of the existence of the woman in the equation, really, to a large extent. And then, of course, that continued in his orgone research, in so far as that, he treated women equally as men in his orgone research. But the books we saw them burn were books about cancer research, supposedly. So I don't know if any of those survived or not. I know that he was dogged with these, contentions of being a charlatan for like the whole second half of his career. He was sort of shut down out of work in Norway over time, which is where he had originally gone, I believe, after he left Freud and, kind of clove away from that group originally in where was it, Austria or wherever they had Freud was running his research.
Yeah, Wien.
University. Yeah. Okay, wasn't it Vienna? It was Vienna.
Yeah, Wien, yeah.
Okay. So he goes from there to Norway. He leaves Norway under the cloud of having potentially been supposedly a Trotskyite, right? A Trotsky loyalist, which is, I guess, the less fashionable form of communism of the time, right? And so either way, he goes to the United States, which he leaves Norway because he can't get an extension on his research visa. The university is like, we don't need this guy around here. He likes Trotsky, apparently. I think he ended up in the United States right around the time McCarthyism also caught up with him here. So
bad luck all the way around. Born in the Ukraine,
so
too.
Like who do you have to be to not, take some dents and scuffs on your reputation in this time and climate?
Well, also, I wanted to harp on your.
Well, so yeah.
I just really quickly wanted to harp on your point of vitalism, actually, because vitalism is really interesting to this, because we were talking last episode about the ego. And so the ego is interesting more after this. I have more. It's good when you have more questions after you have some answers, because the questions we answered about narcissism and humility left me really striving to answer it ego and superego better. Because what is the difference between the self and the not self? That becomes so important when you're talking about vitalism. And what was being introduced by Reichenbach and by Wilhelm Reich, later, is this idea that there's something different about matter that's alive. I mean, essentially, that life is not just corks and moving parts. Like that, life is somehow, the animate quality of life is some sort of an almost pseudo scientifically, spiritual or meta or all of those terms. Whenever we start to talk about how choices exist, from everything's supposed to be expanding out from this Big Bang towards the apocalypse, then everything should just be a series of mousetraps that are going in a certain order, and there's no choice, and our voyeurism is just cupped. And if that's true, that's fine, I guess, for some, but it's not what Reich thought. And it's definitely not what Odism is about. This idea that there's vitalism, there's some sort of actual difference that allows for whatever that choice, range of choice really is. And he was really introducing that in a time when they were really trying to suppress that. They don't want people to believe in life. They want people to think that, it seems like the scientific research from the 20s on in the United States and in Europe pushes for a mechanical atheist perspective, which would mean that everything is without any sort of actual choice based. Every movement and every metric is just a natural progression of this predestined point. Even with all of the randomness that we measure, that doesn't make very much sense. We seem to find more order of choice in the chaos. And so Reich has really harped on that point. And I think it's becoming more and more observed when we look at our universe and we see how choices do affect things. I mean, it's hard to tell almost anyone from this generation, but consequences exist.
Now, am I right? Are you referring in part, at least right now, to the research he did and the particles he called bions and
right,
that whole area, right, of research?
Yeah. If you get into, I'll open up a screen share again. 1 second.
Yeah.
If you get into his bio electrical system work from Odic forces, he was drawing on Odic forces from Reichenbach, and so what had happened was the bioenergetic analysis. I think that's where he's starting to look at the different kinds of metrics, and there's been several different people already before him. So he took a lot of his ideas from Karl Reichenbach. And so Karl Reichenbach was 1788 to 1869, already well established in Prussian academic circles and known around Europe, and the folk movements of Western Europe were really interested in following his natural life force based path. And so Reichenbach kind of was what had been the folklore that had been around when Wilhelm Reich was a boy. Growing up in the Ukraine, this was what natural medicine book had been passed along, and it was working for them. So he was obtaining these very old ideas that go back to the Middle Ages of Europe, how they used to live with I guess you could say like holistic medicines, and all of this comes from this, right? The Western idea of holistic medicines come from Reichenbach, and telling people they need vinegars with honey to deal with from that area, because then the bees have gotten it from the flowers. This is now becoming very popular, but this was also very popular in Prussia in the 19th century. And I
gotta stop you here though and ask you, look at this. What's this here under life? Reichenbach educated at the University of Tübingen, where he obtained a degree, Doctor of Philosophy. At the age of 16, he conceived the idea of establishing a new German state in one of the South Sea islands. And for 5 years, he devoted himself to this project. And then that's it, like one paragraph on that, and then they move on.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of the thing.
Like afterwards, he did this other shit. It's like, wait a second, what are you talking about? He tried to start his own crazy nationalist state on an island somewhere
in Polynesia. And what's funny about that is, like, at this point, you have to remember Prussia. There is no Germany. Okay, so these guys who want to create, he's in Stuttgart, and so imagine you're in Stuttgart. How German is Stuttgart, by the way? And you can't even call yourself German. I mean, it was against the rules. So a lot of people, like the NIMSA groups, when you've seen my earlier episodes on the 19th century UFO flight groups, there were all these groups inventing blimps and things. They were Prussians that were trying to establish new countries. And so, Polynesia and, Swiss Family Robinson and that kind of thing was very common at this point. And this is also when they were establishing colonies everywhere. The Germans were establishing colonies in South America, and anywhere in the world you go today, if you're looking for where the Germans were, find the beer company. So Tsingtao and Tecate and every beer that you've ever seen that has an iron eagle on it, chances are that's the brewery that they installed when they built their colony. It's kind of like a church for the Catholic Church, but instead it's a brewery for the Germans.
Okay, so this was just what every 16-year-old German of a certain social class.
No, that maybe you could say he was pretty much you could say he's the prodigy of a lot of the stuff. Reichenbach was very special, but what ended up happening was he started looking into flat Earth. He was finding out about Earth's particular magnetism. He was doubting the works of He started by studying Galileo, and then he started to decide that Galileo was a made-up name, and that it was all that the world had been, a lot of the history was made up. He went down that path really quickly, and so the long story short, he decided that the Odic forces of Mother Nature were the real thing. What's that? So. Got to mute when you're not. Sorry. But yeah, basically.
I interject really quickly because I've studied Reichenbach for 3 years, and I have 4 of his books. I can't remember the title of his most influential book. So the fact that Reich was taking from the OD, like if you're going to talk about von Reichenbach, that's like a whole separate issue, because he was more smeared than Reich was. Just in his letters on the OD and magnetism, he talks about his struggles. He talks about what he had to go through to try to get published. He also did the work with the sensitives, and it would have been like paranormal psychology and the enlightened. And so he would take them into dark rooms and have charged magnets in completely, pitch black, and they'd be able to tell things that he would bring in. And so he was essentially trying to prove like that magic, or whatever you want to call it, the OD existed, and his studies were duplicated, and they used a scientific method. And again, those have been wiped out, just like Reich's were wiped out. But they're finding these now, and these historians, they're re-educated in the history of science. So you have like a microbiologist who's re-educated in the history of science, and he's so passionate about how this has happened. He's going back through and he's reading Pasteur's notes, and he's comparing them with Reich's notes, and they're redoing the science, because Pasteur did not take into account any type of electromagnetic data. He didn't, if you look at plasma and you look at even like the amoebas that Reich was looking at, things happen that shouldn't have happened when they were in different solvents. And I think it has to do with the base of the slide that they were using and the components that you begin with. So if all of your slides are flawed because you're not using the organic method that Reich had used, then everything after that, using that same method, isn't going to find the results that Reich found by using the method that he did, which was he had the most organic, what are they called? Enclaves? Is that what, I don't remember, when you're a microbiologist. So his sterilization method should be the standard, but that's the one that they took out. And the people that are in the von Reichenbach, that's a book I've been asking people to read for 3 years, because it's psychophysical aspects of crystallization, magnetism, heat. It's the unifying theory. And if you haven't studied all areas of actual histories of science, then that book doesn't make any sense, because he's talking about using crystals, and you're like, this is like magic wizardry. And it's really just the organic use of, us and the earth to try and, mitigate illness and have longevity. And like you were saying, Steve, healthy, happy lives. But with his stress, and a lot of people don't understand this, the reason his stress research is so important is because he talked about like real stress. Like there's a lion chasing you. That's real, actual stress. You're in a car accident. That's stress. Then there's like the neurotic stress. A kid. He used the example of a kid that thinks he's going to lose his penis because he's masturbating. It's a thought that has stress. But then there's this stasis anxiety, stress, where you didn't really think of anything. Nothing bad is happening to you, but you just feel like, why am I stressed out? And so that stasis anxiety is what he's putting into the system of, the autonomic system, saying, if we're not stressed by this, we're not stressed by that. But like, I feel like I have to go for a run or I'm going to freak out. That stasis anxiety is not the same mechanisms causing it. It's a different mechanism, right? Or different cause. And that's what he looked into and was able to separate and say, okay, yeah, then there is a link between the sexual system and the anxiety system, because it's in this autonomic function. And he was able to seriously measure that through experimentation in his research. So that's really interesting. And I had never really separated the stress that I felt like that. There's been days I'm like, I shouldn't be stressed out. Why am I stressed right now? I'm not like, there's no reason. I'm not even thinking about something. And so, yeah, that probably could be based on sexual anxiety and frustration. Who knows? But going for a run, sometimes something artistic, that settles that. I don't know that it actually, I haven't studied enough to know that it does the same thing as the actual orgasm is supposed to do. But I think that's part of what Pearls did, and in the emotive therapy where you're just like, rah, letting your anger out. I mean, if you think about it, it's a similar, mechanism, but you're not getting that full pleasure bout that he talked about that resets the systems. It's kind of the yin and yang. And he was able to measure like electromagnetic charge reaction throughout the whole orgasm, and he made it a system, and he's got it like it's like a science. And anyway, so Karl Reichenbach, if you're gonna bring him up, like I almost just fell over. I've been like, I was like the biggest fan before I found Reich, and yeah.
Also, Mesmer is really important as well, because at the same time you have the idea of animal magnetism, and I think he's maybe born slightly before, but I don't think I think Reichenbach might be first, but they're pretty much around the same time. So Franz Mesmer said that there's an animal force, all living things have a vitalism, have an animal magnetism, and this is true for love, and therefore it's true for primal forces of nature. It's the Liebenmagnetismus. And the mesmerists are still kind of a thing today. We talk about mesmerizing. Something is mesmerizing in English. It means it's fascinating or hypnotic or magnetic, polarizing. And so, were you trying to say something? Sorry.
So Erickson is someone I compare with Reich. Is it Milton? And he's like one of the best, I guess, psychologists. I hadn't even heard of him. We talked about Erik Erikson. But he used a combination of like hypnosis and shock therapy, not electroshock, and told stories and told like mythological tales. And he did this combination. He's like just renowned as one of the greatest psychologists, but he brought back in hypnosis as well. But Mesmer is great. Well, it can be. I mean, think about the implications of hypnosis.
Right. And so some of the main prominent people involved were Benjamin Franklin in the Academy of Sciences that, were appointed by Louis the 16th. You have Benjamin Franklin, you have Jean-Baptiste Leroy, Jean d'Arcy, who's an important chemist as well. And so some of the most important works that have led to what became psychiatry actually started at this point when they started looking into animal magnetism, because they're like, well, what can we do to mitigate the fact that these are natural instincts? And so this all comes back to that kind of century of the self question of, are we under our own control? Because we could be very easily mesmerized, we could be magnetized, polarized, love and sex and hormones today with, like people are taking hormones all the time. And I don't even just mean like deodorant, estrogen. I mean like Nivea creams that have xenoestrogenic qualities, and they have all these different chemicals now that are changing our hormone distribution. I mean, we're looking at sperm rates that are dropping by 2045. I think that most people have near zero. I mean, it's 80% less than it was 70 years ago. So crazy things are happening because of hormones, and this could really control us.
Yeah, I was going to say, interesting that Reich was such a proponent of birth control. I don't know if he was more for like condoms or prophylactics, or like if he was on like taking the pill, or when that came to be. Because
I don't think the pill was out by the time Reich died by 57, so I don't think he was thinking of the pill yet.
Like when did the birth control? I thought it was like 1960s.
Yeah, it's the 60s when they introduced the pill.
But
I mean, it was an idea in the 40s though, but I don't know how long he was interested in it, because we didn't hear his last years because they burned those books.
Yeah, because he was all about like prevention versus, and I don't think he would have been someone that would have wanted to change a female's chemical, hormones.
I'd like to bring up a strange example, actually, of sexualized propaganda, and I think it's the band Tattoo. So I really liked this band back when I was young, and I was like 10 when this band was a thing, but now, because of the way the Russian Federation has changed and pivoted from the way they're not following the same line, or how do you say, political things are banned that they made. They've banned things they've made themselves. So like tattoo is essentially created by the Russian state. I mean, obviously the record companies were quasi government run, and it's supposed to be a lesbian kind of thing. Like there's like an aesthetic that they're in love with each other, and the songs are all about how they're going to be lesbians, which, I mean, you can think of this from a Bernays perspective, that Mother Russia loves herself. And so this is a step away from international socialism for Russia, and that we're defining ourselves as a Russian Federation where we love Mother Russia and we are Mother Russia, which is a pretty interesting political ideology. I appreciated that. But what's happened is, because of their transcending into the scare in Russia of the LGBT community and the ideology, I think is the biggest thing, because they don't really like yoga either. Like in general, they're worried about ideologies that can infect or impact or come in between the love for Mother Russia. They have basically stopped the support of the band, and they've been feuding. So one of the girls is now in support, and she's slowly been distancing herself from support, but was in 2007 and talked about participating in the gay pride parade in Moscow. After that, tattoo was done completely. And Katina, Yulia says that she always wished she'd never been part of the band, that she kind of regrets being a part of the thing, as far as she's been told, that all of this was a show, and that, you know, it was all an accident and a mistake. And so it's interesting to see how quickly you can, and religion is found, oh, she's become Orthodox, amazing, and she doesn't like Muslims because Putin said so. So this all happened literally because of a propaganda campaign that was used over sexuality, you know. And it's funny because sexuality is still the thing that we're being controlled by, even, you know, what is this, 2021?
Being controlled by it, but it also shall set us free.
I'm just surprised by the information I get, and actually I'm surprised by how that you knew about this tattoo thing, that it was made by state, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, that's what you said. That's great.
Yeah, more or less. I
great.
mean, yeah, more or less, if you think about how the record companies are associated. I mean, yeah, I mean, a lot of really interesting bands in America are made by the American state as well. We have Tavistock in Britain, and we have the if you've ever heard of the Church Committee hearings, you can find out a lot about how, you know, MK Ultra, America interacts with making rock music, the Monkees and all of these kinds of bands that were fabricated. In fact, we've made it into kind of a TV show now, where we show people this happening in front of a live studio audience. Like American Idol is sort of that, and bands like it.
Yeah, because Russians don't have, especially there's Russian state that doesn't have a good record for supporting gay rights, or any like, they're so conservative in a way. They don't adapt to changes, and it's just surprising to that something like that happened before, and what led to this group. And also Pussy Riot, as you know, yeah, Pussy Riot and Tattoo seems like to at least to wider audience outside Russia, they look like these people who shake things up to bring the change what's happening in whole Russia, because it's the way people live there is not really comfortable for big parts of population.
Right. Well, these ladies have been in and out of incarceration because of their activism and outspoken position in the past, right? Isn't one of them's missing right now? One of them's locked up like right now. Pussy Riot.
Yeah, I mean, I try to stay out of other people's countries' politics, but I'll tell you, I mean, I saw them in Santa Cruz when they played the Straight Out of Pussy, or Straight Out of Vagina, I think was their tour, but it was great. And so, yeah, I kind of hope that all works out for the best, and I wish her well. But apparently, this is a public demonstration. They don't want anyone to they don't want anyone to do what they did again. So they've made her made an example of her. It's been pretty bad.
I guess I'll kind of add a little bit. I guess I'm kind of concerned a little bit on the modern politics towards, I guess, over sexualizing, but also suppression of sexuality to a degree, because it seems like there's so many intersecting values, these days that are just competing against each other. And I mean, it really just depends on, your own perspective on how you want to carry yourself as a individual. But I guess the overall efficacy of like how we can actually, mend these values so that, we're not all fighting about, I guess just competing sexualities in a sense. Like, it's very, very difficult. I don't know. It's almost like you'd have to just like break everything down into like smaller pieces to try to figure out like where these people can kind of like mingle on ideas, not physically, but just within an idea on something, but also just not be I guess trying to belittle someone in the process. That's something I just noticed online more than anything else. It's even with words like incel, I usually see that in I've seen some people like take pride in the word or whatever, weirdly enough, but I guess it's used more as a combative tool more than anything else. That's what made me kind of feel like it was more of something that was just political at first, but at the same time, like I guess getting out of like the heteronormative culture that we were kind of like already in before. It's like now we're kind of moving into like a, I guess, broader culture where more things are more acceptable. I don't know. It's just a very hard space to navigate, and I would just like to see people to have better conversations around these things without getting so heated about it. But that's just my 2 cents.
I noticed it very much also depends that some people. Well, I'll tell you about my way of thinking. So I don't mind people doing whatever they really want to do if they don't bother me with their actions. And then there are, I believe it was in Uzbekistan, where they're pretty, I would say, advanced now, but I forgot this word. Advanced country where with a high Muslim population, and they have activists who fight for gay rights and LGBT rights. And I heard an interview with a very short video with some Muslim blogger who was furious that these actions that other people do that I don't believe impact his quality of life, that LGBT people who defend LGBT and are for gay rights, he said that it brings shame to his belief, and it degrades his how do you say, when you do something bad, it attacks his religion and his beliefs. Yeah. That's what he said. Man, it's just like, why? How can you put this together even? what other people do and your beliefs. It doesn't really work that way. I mean, I don't understand, but it's just that idea that we are very different in the way we think, and some places are really much more conservative by the culture, by tradition.
Right.
I think,
People need. Oh, go ahead.
They're good. Oh, well, I was just gonna, I guess, add to that. Like, I feel like subconsciously, a lot of religious people are trying to protect some kind of biological reproductive method, in a sense. Like, maybe they're not like fully aware of it, because I mean, they're trying to think about, you know, a man and a woman being able to produce a child, and they kind of see that as like, you know, a form of like God's creation, in a sense. So I mean, I can see where they might try to, you know, want to preserve that, but I'm not against, you know, other, you know, sexualities like having their thing either. You know, it's like, I want people to be able to freely express themselves, you know, I guess sexually or however they want to. But I guess also too, like, when it comes to traditional values and whatnot, I mean, it is a hard space for me too, because I mean, there's a lot of different things that I'll argue against when it comes to traditionalism, but at the same time, like, it's almost like we also have to argue, like, well, what actually works, like, towards certain reproductive values and a certain extent as well. Like, you know, I'm for both sides on that, like, you know, just sexual expression, but also, you know, being able to preserve, like, well, what is best for possibly a family functionality of some sort, you know, like trying to figure out what's best for a child and their upbringing. And, you know, I don't claim to know those answers on those particular subjects, but I think it's just something that we do, you know, need to think about within our cultures to, you know, I guess, how do we blend, like I was saying earlier, like, how do we blend these worlds without, you know, being at some kind of larger conflict with each other? Like, we need to, you know, find ways to accept everyone, but also, you know, not want to just tear each other down by, you know, just having certain beliefs in something. But that's just my opinion.
It also seems like sexuality, again, becomes an issue for the industrialization of sex, because we've gone through a civilization where they say the oldest profession is the prostitute. It might not be. It might be the pimp. And so we think about how long the acceptance of this in, you know, human trafficking and sex work has been. And you look at, you know, like Sheila Keel, I think her name is. Let me look really quickly. The Industrial Vagina, the Political Economy of the Global Sex Trade, which is a book. I always remember if it's Sheila Jeffries or Sheila Jeffries. But I think she's written this really interesting long history of the human pimping market in history, and how far prostitution goes into not just the labor, but also in propaganda and into commercialism, because this is why men buy fancy cars, why men buy fancy suits. I mean, often the people making propaganda, making you know, models hair and photographing them, they tend to be even homosexual sometimes. They're not necessarily even interested in having sex with these women that they're trafficking or that they're photographing in order to sell to men, often. And this was originally the case, but now things have shifted quite a bit to being sell to everybody, their own sexuality to them, because you can say, well, I'm going to give you pills for your sexuality, or I'm going to make it possible for you to meet someone because your car is red, or I'm going to say that your shoes are all the difference in the world. And what's crazy now, I was looking at COVID's impact on the world, and one of the ones I find most interesting is OnlyFans explosion, because so many people have turned into cam girls or cam persons. I mean, obviously there's all sorts of people on these cams now, but it's pretty strange. You have 57-year-olds that are doing OnlyFans, and 19 and 18-year-olds, as soon as they can possibly do it, they're doing OnlyFans. And so they're taking these you know, private style, you know, sexualized videos and sharing them in ways that they're This picture, for instance, shows a girl who's kind of looking like she's ready to have sex with you, the viewer, as she's breaking the fourth wall. And this is where society is going with the industrialization and the commercialization of sexuality. I find it interesting how much control this is allowed the internet to take over us through our biopsychotherapy, or biopharmacology and bioenergies, because you're putting no more time into human interaction with each other, and instead we're putting all this time into trying to translate those feelings, the strongest feelings we have, into being picked up by phones, by sensors, and kind of getting down to the primal urges that we can share with each other. It's as if they took a mother apart in front of a monkey and gave it the furry machine or the milk, and it could choose between holding on to this fur, or it could go to drinking the milk from the wired cage. And they're finding out how they can break apart the idea of a mother, or of sex, or of love, or of feelings, or of human interaction. And I find that to be probably the most relevant point, like what makes it so scary, that our feelings are being controlled and commodified.
Yeah, I mean, I can relate with that. I mean, also one of the first things I guess that kind of popped into my mind is how often people break, I guess the age boundary with those things. Like they'll, lie about their age and, try to get started even earlier. I don't know. It's just, it kind of goes along with the whole cultural conversation around like, pedophilia and everything right now. But also just heightening other conversations around just sex workers as a whole. I remember actually reading about a lot of those things that you brought up too as well earlier on this year. So it is very interesting how much more, culture as itself can really kind of help fuel those things, I guess unconsciously. It's like a lot of times they'll be trying to do it for money, or, like we said earlier, just like sexual expression of some kind, but then also try to, well, mistakenly like fueling a whole other area of whether you might consider it crime or just other sense of sexuality itself. Like it's, I don't know, it's just concerning to me. I don't know how to deal with it.
Well, I find it funny that if this guy is right about anything, he might be worth looking into some of his weirder stuff. So Wilhelm Reich said all that and talked about life having energy and said, look, this is what they're going to do to us. Look at fascism. Look at OnlyFans. It's coming. You're going to start buying your lovers on Amazon couples match or something. It's going to be, 4-star out of 5 reviews on all the people that you can make a relationship with. And they're going to be, guaranteed by the company. Like the thing that he said you could do about that is that orgone accumulator. And so that's probably the craziest sounding thing, but all it really is this idea of kind of creating something that you're storing energy with. So it's like the Kegelian dialectic, Kegels, like we switch over to the human body as being something that you're putting that energy into something other than just your phone. Because so much of your energy right now is literally going into my feelings. I'm going to push with my finger to consent to love, or to happy, or to sad. I mean, think about how often you do this. You're like, well, yeah, or or you're holding this thing and putting all of this energy into this thing, right? And it's already a crazy battery powered 5G device. Get yourself some of the orgone. I know it sounds like, but hey, try anything once. So literally different kinds of stones and rocks in a resin, and then he's putting energy into that.
I have a number of thoughts, including an appreciation for Ty's comments about, feeling stuck in between a rock and a hard place of philosophically being completely all about do as thou wilt, express yourself, be whoever you are. But perhaps it also at times feeling like you're constantly being confronted with the threshold of your own personal limitations, as a parent raising 2 younger boys, right now in their lives, right, 8 and 4 years old, in a house full of screens that are all internet connected. And these kids are, little self-styled wannabe YouTubers, right now. He, he brought up points that really resonated with me because I know my wife and I have a running joke around the house here that for a while there, for a good couple of years there, and actually it's going on in the same way right now in a different way, but we were laughing about Netflix because it seemed like Netflix was absolutely convinced that we were super gay and wanted a lot of gay and lesbian programming like in our suggested and in our feeds, and there's no other way to put it, you know what I mean? This is fucking super gay up in my Netflix for years, and now it's super anime up in my Netflix. They're convinced. I think I watched, you know, Attack on Titan a few years ago when it first hit, which phenomenal anime, by the way, you know, anybody who hasn't seen it knows, great one. But my entire Netflix is anime these days, you guys. I'm not even kidding you. You have to like actively go hunt off into the weeds to find something that's not anime right now. So I don't know, but it calls into question the matter of whether or not taking a step back from the Reich and what he did or didn't do and how good or bad a person he was in his personal life and how valid or, you know, woo-woo some of his ideas might have been. A lot of the stuff that he got into, especially in the latter day years, verged on, you know, his hair tells the story, right? Verged on, you know, wizardry by another name, right? But really, he was more holistic in his approach to treating human ailments and solving problems than pharmacological and invasive, right? Like surgery and stuff like that, like we currently deal with. We got like palliative care that manages illnesses but doesn't really cure them, or we go in and cut little chunks of people out to fix them up, cure them. And that seems to be the team that's won the medical treatment side of things, right? They're continually going after natural medicine and naturopaths and practitioners of anything that's an alternative medicine type. Putting that aside, you just said it though a moment ago, there was the point about, have I heard about orgone accumulators? Definitely, right? And we've all seen those little weird glitter filled pyramids with copper tubes in them and stuff like that, and maybe a quartz crystal sunk inside of them.
I mean, look how 60s this is, right?
There's an orgone cabinet right there, right? So this, you know, I'm having a hard time understanding, you know, what went on in here other than,
I mean, it makes really this makes
closed, bro. Do what you need to do to feel good. You know what I mean?
I mean, there really is it makes a lot of sense. Like for Faraday, it's a Faraday cage, right? So you have no electricity that's able to bounce into this box. So you're not getting affected by what that in the 50s, there was already crazy amounts of UHF television and radio signals from, you know, watching jets fly around the world all the time without ever landing because other jets had to fill them and they had radio signals. So a Faraday cage was useful then. Now you can test these things by bringing your cell phone in. My friends have one at the Falcon Research Lab where we're doing the anti-gravity.
Claims to do it. I have an app that claims to do it. It seems to do different things when I pointed at some different stuff, but I'm always expecting like some of
what I mean with that, this is better than an app. What happens is if you go into a Faraday cage with your phone, if it connects at all, it's not working. The Faraday cage just blocks everything. So it's like a lead-lined refrigerator for Indiana Jones, you know, but you get inside of this thing and you're left with your own resonance because everybody has, guess it what, you know, get a Geiger counter. We have electrical impulses and signals in our own resonance, and we change them. We change them with sunlight, with music, with interacting with other people. Like we electromagnetically respond with other people.
Walking around barefoot in contact with the earth. I think Mike wasn't ignorant of either the fact that, you know, we are connected to the larger systems, the people, living beings, right? So
I was just wondering about this with radio frequencies and just kind of like how they might linger in space over time. Because, you know, after we send it out, it kind of just like keeps on going freely into space. You know, there's not really much to really hold it back unless there's some other kind of particle or, you know, other matter that might get in the way. I mean, it just keeps on continuously going, but it also kind of makes me wonder with like other, you know, warps within space-time that, you know, some of these like lingering frequencies might get caught up in space and even wrapped around and sometimes even loop back in on itself, towards possibly even back towards Earth in some ways. I don't know, just some of the things you were saying about like spiritual voices and how they've been recording different things over time. It just kind of makes me like wonder, like if like there's, some of our current frequencies that could be, somehow interrelated back through space towards a past time period in some sense. I'm not saying that's possible, but I don't know. I just think it's something kind of fun to speculate on, just because, I mean, theoretically, you could do that kind of stuff into the future, and maybe with early, radio
I
technologies.
thought it would be easier to look into the past than the future. I think I like the
Not
thing.
sure.
The thing you're proposing right now, Ty, I think is something that's isn't it like the panopticon kind of thought experiment? Panopticon's the wrong word, because that's like when you have a control tower in the center of a prison where you can see all the movements of all the inmates around you. And
Well,
so
it might not
it's
be.
like it's like an oculus that, it's the scrying stone that you can look backwards through time. I think they're basically saying that the thought experiment is such that the only true form of time travel is that of observing backward through time, and you could potentially do that through
if you can see what happened, you can predict the future often, right? We have
exactly
thousands of kinds of.
It would be the strongest form anyway of time travel, right? Like you'd have total power.
And that seems like what's going on. If the sun is creating the same delineations, and there's different kinds of suns are very similar in mass, are creating the same delineations, then we can pick places which are having almost identical delineations. So there would be a very similar humanoid Earth structure. We'd have this conversation could just be part of the time likely sequence to happen of our particles expanding and destroying. I mean, that is that scientific bag right there, that we could easily just be affected by light waves, and that we're just, that is the EVP.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but like radio waves, like they travel the speed of light, right? I mean, and there's
light doesn't have a specific speed. That's like a weird misnomer. Actually, light can travel at different speeds.
Yeah, yes. I feel like they're pretty zippy. Yeah, I think they're right. Yeah, I think they're jamming. It's not like sound waves that we hear on either end of the transmission. You know what I mean? That's coming out.
It's much faster than sound. Radio is instant.
It transfers in between is quicker. Yeah, exactly. I know we're getting ready to wrap up. I do want to reiterate, I appreciated Ty's comments about feeling, stuck in that middle place of philosophically totally all about everybody do their thing. And then at the same time, I know I'm on my own personal journey, and I've got kids who I'm just trying to shelter. Sometimes I think appropriately, and maybe sometimes I have to learn how to continue to let them, experience the world. But I was going to say this. You guys brought up how OnlyFans has apparently done really well in the course of the last year. That was obviously a reference to how it flourished under a lockdown, right? On the flip side of that same coin, I will personally testify to having a better relationship with my wife and my kids than I did going into the lockdown. And we already had a great relationship, but I think that we heard a lot of early reports of people, going home for the first time for all day long, stuck at home with people who weren't the best to be home with, right? So people initially had some more reports of domestic violence and all sorts of other challenges, and I shudder to think inside and cringe to think inside about the kids who went home to shitty homes instead of my kids who just came home to us, like doing shit with them nonstop. You know what I mean? Under lockdown. But everybody I've talked to, at least in my neighborhood, and, family and friends on the phone and stuff, who's brought it up in a lot of cases in a roundabout way on their own, they're just talking about the good times they're having and how they've been making the best of things and how they kind of like it this way. So again, I say this all with the proviso of, I don't know, are we all victims of cybernetics and conditioning and social engineering anyway? including when we say, oh, I kind of like it having my family closer to me. I kind of like it with, you know, my wife working remote and the kids learning remotely. And we don't have to, you know, separate from each other at 6 o'clock in the morning every day, and sometimes not see each other with traffic until like 7 o'clock at night, 5 days out of the week. It doesn't make for great dinner times, y'all. You know what I mean? The air fryer just works overtime on days like that. And that goes on for months and shit and years out of your life. So I don't know if we're like becoming enlightened and getting back in touch with each other only to have it all yanked away from us again when they say, hey, we've cured COVID, you guys are super immune, you're good to go back to spring break, Mardi Gras, go nuts, life is back to normal, as if, you know. So I don't know that we're getting that back. We all already know, we felt it at the gas station. We were like, why is that guy looking at me funny? Oh, I forgot my fucking mask and I'm pumping gas without my mask on. And this guy's kind of giving me the look like, are you serious right now? Like, you know what I mean? Like, we're judging each other and then feeling the shame, feeling the reaction of the shame of like walking around with our naked faces and open fresh air. When I've already got one vaccine and my next weekend I get the other. No matter how woke I want to pretend to be on the internet, I know I'm already in the fucking machine, you guys. I got a family who I got to deal with. I got to go to stores. I got to do business with people. My wife has to go to work. It's, you know, they already did us. We're done.
Yeah,
Social
I have the same
score
concerns.
is here. You know what I mean? Vaccine passports are here. You know, play act all you want, posture all you want about they'll never get me. Good luck. Good luck driving everywhere forever for the rest of your life.
I can't wait till I can take a train though from California to China through Russia. That's coming. So that's coming back like it used to be in the 1800s.
There we go. So
but fair play. Are we human or are we dancer?
Whoa. We got a lot of distortion on that. Sorry.
Oh, sorry. I said, are we human? That's hilarious. Are we human or are we dancer?
There we go. See, the Matrix was trying to just say, just stop right there. Don't even ask.
Fair play. Yeah.
Discussion. Much love, guys.
Well, all right. Really appreciated that we did a Wilhelm Reich introduction and we talked a little bit about anxiety and also about sexual control and in society. I think that's important. So I hope to see you guys next time and thanks for being here.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks for inviting us.
Yeah, appreciate it.
Es liegt ein Haftbefehl wegen Missachtung des Gerichts gegen Sie vor.
Dr. Reich hat diese Kisten vermietet, obwohl ein Gerichtsbeschluss ihm ausdrücklich untersagt hatte, dies zu tun. Ein Sexguru.
I happen to discover the life energy. I happen to induce or do an experiment. I know what it means for the future development of medicine, biology, philosophy, and natural science. I'm fully aware of it, and in this awareness, I am completely alone. There's no soul anywhere far and wide to talk to give one's feelings, to let one's feelings go freely, to speak like as friends speak to each other. I shall not go into the great strain, into the details, into the worries, the sleepless nights, the tears, the expenditures in money and effort, the patience which I have to have with all my workers and with all my students. Their efforts, their honor, their loves, their lives. I say it because it is true, because it turns up in every single move, in every single word, in every single opinion, in every single paper, in every single thing they did to whatever ever had to do with the discovery of genitality, life, love. Such people as Lawrence, or such philosophies as Giordano Bruno's, or such great lives as Jesus Christ, and so forth and so forth. It is a sad, lonely chapter of the human race. I don't feel that I am obligated to solve this riddle or to do anything about it. As much as we can say 8,000 or 10,000 years since patriarchy has ruled its destinies and since the natural love was extinguished in the newborn infants. I shall not go into that, it's all written up in my publications. Whoever knows these publications also knows what that means. The discovery of the life energy would have been accomplished long ago had this I don't want it, I fear it, I loathe it, I'll kill it, I'll flatten it out, I won't let it live or exist. If that had not been in their structures, not in their desires, not in their positive conscious wishes, they're all decent and good people. No, it is in the structure. It is somehow in their tissues, in their blood. They cannot tolerate anything that has to do with orgone energy or life energy, or what they call God, or what is their deepest longing for love, for fulfillment. They cannot tolerate it, and they fear it. They fear it by way of structure. Their tissues, their blood, cannot stretch out, cannot take it, evades it, avoids it, and loathes it.
Listen now to my advice, the recipe for better life. Hey! Don't follow your heart, it might only let you down. Follow only reason, emotions lead to treason. Only one thing will never let you down. To believe in yourself, believe in the reasons that you have laid out in the argument that will last forever. No one can tell you where to go or why. It is within you to figure it out. Using the mind and using the freedom to engage with different ideas. Listen now to my advice, the truth can often be disguised. Hey! Don't follow your heart, it might only let you down. Follow only reason, emotions lead to treason. Only one thing will never let you down. To believe in yourself, believe in the reasons that you have laid out in the argument that will last forever. Listen to the voice of reason, listen to the arguments. Listen to the voice of reason, listen to the arguments. Listen to the voice of reason, listen to the arguments. Listen to the voice of reason, Listen to the arguments. Don't follow your heart, oh no. It might only let you down. Follow only reason, 'cause emotions lead to treason. And believe in yourself. Believe in the reasons that you have laid out in the argument that will last forever.